November 1947. Backstage at the Meridian Club in Manhattan, Frank Sinatra heard something through a half-open door that stopped him cold. Lena Horne was sitting alone at a makeup table crying. She'd just finished performing to a full house. What Sinatra said to the club owner in the next 10 minutes didn't just silence that room. It ended a career, and nobody who was there ever forgot it. By the fall of 1947, Frank Sinatra was living inside a particular kind of pressure that doesn't show up easily in photographs. The Bobby Soxers, who had packed the Paramount Theater 4 years earlier, who had genuinely fainted in the aisles and screamed his name like a prayer, were thinning out. Columbia Records was growing impatient with him. His films had stalled after a promising start, and the gossip columns that had once treated him like American royalty were now running items about his marriage, his temper, and his associations with men whose names appeared periodically in federal proceedings. None of it was secret. Some of it was considerably worse than what made the papers. He was 32 years old and famous in the way that makes people assume you have everything handled. He didn't. But he had one thing that the pressure hadn't touched, a specific, almost physical response to a particular kind of injustice, the kind that bypassed calculation entirely and arrived as something closer to reflex. He'd grown up in Hoboken, the son of Italian immigrants, in a neighborhood where you learned early what it felt like to be told your kind wasn't welcome in certain rooms. That education hadn't made him sentimental about it. It had made him precise. He knew the specific texture of being dismissed before you opened your mouth. He recognized it the way you recognize a smell instantly, without having to think about what it is. The Meridian Club sat on the west side of Midtown, one of those rooms that never advertised, because it didn't need to. It drew the right crowd, people with money and taste, and the social standing that made their presence feel like an endorsement of wherever they chose to sit. Walter Grimes had built it from a mid-tier supper club into something that mattered, and he was proud of that in the way that men are proud of things they have calculated rather than created. Grimes was not a simple man, and that's worth saying clearly. He wasn't a man who hated Lena Horne. He admired her in the detached and practical way that a businessman admires a profitable arrangement. He booked her 3 nights running because he understood exactly what she brought to a stage. The way a room changed when she walked to the microphone. The way even people who were deep in conversations stopped talking. He understood it in dollars, which is its own kind of understanding. What Grimes also understood, and what he had built his entire operation around accommodating, was his clientele. A significant portion of the Meridian's regulars had come up in a particular era, with particular expectations about the organization of the world. Grimes didn't share those expectations, or at least that's what he told himself on the nights when he had to think about it. But he had learned early that disrupting them cost money, and money was the architecture his life was built on. So there were rules at the Meridian. Not written rules, the kind that exist in the gap between what a man says he believes and what he does when it becomes inconvenient to believe it. Rules about which entrance a performer used, about which rooms were available to them before and after a show, about what happened in a private office when the wrong people were in the room together. Lena Horne knew about those rules. She had been navigating versions of them for her entire career at the clubs that booked her, and the hotels that housed her, and the film studios that used her image without ever letting her character speak to a white actor on screen. She was 30 years old that November. She had already learned more about the distance between talent and dignity than most people learn in a lifetime. Sinatra arrived at the Meridian that night as a guest. Grimes had invited him personally, the kind of gesture club owners make when they want a recognizable name at their tables on a given evening. Sinatra had agreed, mostly because he hadn't caught Lena live in over a year, and wanted to. She was everything she always was. There's a specific quality to watching a performer who has decided for one night to give everything, not for the crowd, but almost despite them. Lena Horne in 1947 had that quality in abundance. She moved through the room's attention like it was air she was used to breathing. The applause when she finished went long enough that Grimes had to signal the band twice. Sinatra finished his drink and made his way backstage. He knew the layout of rooms like this, the narrow corridors behind the stage, the cold radiator smell, the particular quality of silence that falls over a venue after the last set ends and the audience starts dispersing. He walked toward the dressing rooms, He was maybe 20 feet from the door when he heard it. Not crying in the way that asks to be noticed. The other kind, contained practiced, the kind that means someone has learned to do this particular thing quietly, in small rooms alone. He stopped. The door was open 4 in. He could see the edge of a vanity mirror, a glass of water, the back of a performance gown. He stood there for a moment, with his hand raised, not quite knocking. There's a version of this moment where he walks past, where he decides the corridor is too narrow for whatever is on the other side of that door, where he calculates that it's not his problem, and the calculation lands in the direction of the exit. He knocked. A pause, then her voice. One moment he heard the sound of composure being rebuilt from the inside. The particular silence of someone making their face into something it wasn't a few seconds ago. Then the door opened, and Lena Horne was standing there, her expression arranged into something professional and slightly remote. "Frank," she said it with the specific surprise of someone who expected almost anyone else. "You are extraordinary tonight," he said. "Thank you." Neither of them moved. "What happened?" he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she stepped back and let him in. The story she told him was not complicated. It didn't need to be. After the show, she'd gone to find Grimes about a detail in the final night's contract. His office door was open. He was inside with 2 of his regulars, front table men, the kind who treated a room like it belonged to them because in every way that mattered, it did. She knocked. Grimes waved her in. The taller one looked her over, the way you look at something you're deciding whether to buy. Then he smiled at his friend and said, without lowering his voice, "Walter, I have to ask. Where do you find them? You've got the best trained help in the city." The other man laughed. Grimes laughed. Not because it was funny. The laugh of a man who has made his decision before his mouth opens. She saw it happen in real time, watched his face choose what it was going to do, and watched it choose wrong. She said, "Good night." She walked back down the corridor. She found the dressing room, and she sat down, and she let herself have 3 minutes of it, before she was going to put it away and get on with the evening. Sinatra listened to all of it without interrupting. He was sitting on the edge of a stool near the door, elbows on his knees, looking at the floor in the particular way a person looks at a floor, when they're not seeing it at all. When she finished, the room was quiet. "Which office?" he said. "Frank, which office?" He didn't knock. Grimes was behind his desk, alone now, going through papers with the efficiency of a man who had already filed the evening away. He looked up when the door opened. Something in his face did a small, quick calculation. "Frank, hell of a show tonight. Close the door." Grimes reached past Sinatra and pulled it shut. The room was small. A desk, 2 chairs, a lamp with a green glass shade that made the light look like it was coming from somewhere underwater. Sinatra didn't sit. He stood near the door, with his hands in his jacket pockets, and looked at Grimes the way you look at a problem you're still measuring. 3 nights, Sinatra said. "Full room, every night." Grimes nodded carefully. "She's remarkable. We were lucky. And then you let 2 of your regulars talk to her like that, in your office, while you were sitting there." The silence that followed was very specific. It had the quality of a denial being weighed, costed, and set aside. It was a private conversation. Grimes said things were said that got out of, "I'm not asking you to explain it." Sinatra's voice was flat and even. "She walked off stage after giving you everything she had, and she walked into your office, and something happened there that sent her to a dressing room to cry by herself, and you let that happen. That's all I know. That's enough." Grimes shifted. "These are long-standing clients. Frank, you know how this business." "Stop. 1 word. Room temperature. No escalation around it." Grimes stopped. Sinatra pulled a chair from the wall and sat down. He crossed one leg over the other. He looked almost relaxed, and that was the thing about it. The absence of heat, the absence of performance. It made the room feel smaller. "You've been trying to get me into this room for 2 years. Sinatra said. "I know because your people have called my people 6 times, give or take." He paused. "I've been considering it. I was considering it tonight, actually, while I was watching her work." Grimes was very still. "I'm not considering it anymore. A beat. And I'm going to be seeing Tommy Dorsey next week and a few other people whose opinion tends to travel. I won't be discussing these specifically." He looked at Grimes directly for the first time since sitting down. "I'll just be talking about what kind of room this is, what kind of man decides what happens inside it." The green lamp hummed somewhere outside. The band was breaking down equipment, the routine sounds of an evening ending. Grimes stood up. He didn't say anything. He straightened his jacket with both hands, the careful gesture of a man trying to locate his own composure. He walked to the door, opened it, and went down the hall. Sinatra sat alone in the office for a moment, then he got up and followed. What happened in that dressing room, between Grimes and Lena Horne, nobody repeated. The people standing in the corridor said it lasted about 4 minutes. They said, when Grimes came out, he didn't look like a man who'd resolved something. He looked like a man who had just understood the actual size of what he'd done. Not the version he'd been carrying, which was small and manageable, but the real one. He walked past Sinatra without a word. Later, Sinatra and Lena sat at a table in the back of the empty showroom. The chairs were already up on most of the tables. A single bartender moved through the closing routine. They talked about the music, about people they both knew, about things that didn't need to go anywhere particular, the kind of conversation that exists because the company is enough. At some point, Lena looked at him and said, "You didn't have to do that." Sinatra was watching the empty stage. He was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "I did. No inventory of reasons, no speech, just that." And then he picked up his glass. Walter Grimes's name faded from the rooms that mattered within 3 years. It happened the way these things happen, when word travels without anyone being loud about it. Bookings that quietly didn't come through, names that stopped returning calls, a reputation that developed a particular texture that nobody would put into a sentence, but everyone understood. By 1951, the Meridian had changed hands. Grimes moved to a smaller operation and then out of the business entirely. He never spoke publicly about that night. Whether Sinatra made specific calls, nobody confirmed on the record. What did travel through the green rooms, the booking offices, the late conversations between people who worked the circuit, was the shape of what happened backstage at the Meridian in November 1947. Not dramatic, almost procedural. Sinatra walked into an office, sat down, explained the cost of the decision, and left. Lena Horne performed in better rooms as the years went on, and there were more of them. She and Sinatra stayed close, in the way that people stay close when they've shared something they don't need to discuss again. She spoke about him with a specific quiet affection in the interviews she gave over the decades, the kind reserved for people who showed up when there was nothing in it for them. It should be said that Sinatra's record through those years was not clean in every direction. His associations, his temper, the distance between his public gestures and his private behavior in other areas, none of that resolves neatly against an evening like this one. Real people don't resolve neatly. What's true is that on that particular night, in that particular corridor, he heard something that most people would have kept walking past. He didn't keep walking. That's not a small thing. It's also not the whole story of the man. It's just one true part of it. Have you ever been in a moment where the easier thing was to keep walking, and you had to decide in a few seconds what kind of person you actually